Charlie, welcome to the summit. For anybody that isn't aware of your work, could you just tell us a bit more about your background and what initially got you interested in doing work with the shadow?
Yeah, sure thing. So I initially got interested in lucid dreaming and Buddhism in my kind of mid to late teens. That eventually led to working with some Buddhist teachers around lucid dreaming, which is the practice of becoming conscious within your dream and then being able to direct the dream at will. And that has a long history within Tibetan Buddhism. So I was getting into lucid dreaming and Buddhism in my late teens, ended up following some Buddhist teachers who were teaching lucid dreaming, or as it's known, Milam Nalja, or dream yoga is the kind of rough translation. And ended up living in a Buddhist center for 8 years. And one of the teachers who, actually to go back a little bit, one of the teachers who I was working with on the lucid dreaming stuff, a man called Rob Nairn, who wrote a book called Living, Dreaming, Dying, which is a Western psychological exploration of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So for anyone out there who's tried to read the Tibetan Book of the Dead and maybe like me, like, boom, like what the fuck is that about? Living, Dreaming, Dying is brilliant because he uses terms like enlightened archetype, you know, these Jungian terms, because Rob Nairn was a Jungian psychologist. That really opened me up to all the death stuff. And through that, through his work with the teachings of Carl Jung, to the shadow. And so one day I was talking to Rob Nairn about these nightmarish lucid dreams I'd been having, where I'd be getting lucid and I'd try and do like the good stuff in my lucid dreams, like my Buddhist practice, saying mantras. Because in the Buddhist tradition, the reason you have lucid dreams is to do your spiritual practice while you sleep. So as soon as you get lucid, rather than just like flying about and meeting movie stars, which is another thing you can do in the lucid dream, you do your Buddhist practice in the dream as a preparation for death, actually, in the long run. So I'd be doing all that, trying to be like really pure and stuff. And then I'd have these really crazy kind of outbursts in the lucid dream of like just sex and violence. And I thought this really bad and I was really like embarrassed. And I told Rob, man, oh, I'm sorry, I have these really kind of sexual violent things emerging, but it's okay, I'm fighting them. And he went, fighting them? And I went, yeah, I can do this thing where I turn myself into Wolverine and I used to go, boom, and I'd get the spike things come out, and I'd kill these monsters, these demons. And I remember him looking at me and giving me this look that only really your mum gives you. Like, you know, when you've done something like batshit stupid, but it's your mum, so she loves you. And she goes, And he just looked at me like that and he goes, Charlie, I advise you to do the precise opposite of what you've been doing. These things you are meeting in your dream are not demons, they are your shadow. You must embrace the shadow. So then I start Googling and looking at like what the shadow is. Oh yeah, it's that Jungian concept of the parts within us that we deny, disown, reject. And I guess maybe it's my aggression and sexuality that I'm rejecting by trying to be this pure Buddhist, you know, in my early 20s, trying to be all pure and meditating and stuff. So he said to embrace them. And then the story that I tell in my TED talk is when the next kind of monster thing appeared in my lucid dream, and I literally embraced it. And it was nuts because it was this big, like monster, classic monster thing with 3 heads. And I embraced it in the lucid dream. And when I did, it transformed into me. And I'm standing there hugging myself, but it's me, but I'm kind of like made of silver. I'm kind of metallic. And then I woke up and I told him a few weeks later what had happened. I said, you know, was that it? Did I embrace the shadow? And he went, yes, Charlie, that was absolutely the shadow, but you're crazy. I didn't mean to literally hug it. And I was like, but you said embrace it. And he was like, yeah, embracing the shadow is like a Jungian term, a like metaphorical term used for facing that which we do not want to face. But since then, he said, actually, the cool thing about the lucid dream is that the shadow appears in personified form often. So you can work with the shadow in a personalized way. You can literally dialogue with it. You can hug it. You can shake its hand, not metaphorically, literally. So since then, he said, oh, the lucid dream is a perfect place to meet and embrace the shadow because you can actually hug it. And what could be a better kind of symbolic expression of integration than to actually hug the shadow. So that's how I got into shadow work, is hugging it, first in the lucid dream, and then eventually just reading up on loads of stuff around shadow and Jung, and teaching people first of all to do it in their lucid dreams, and then just being a bit disappointed that the lucid dream state wasn't that accessible for a lot of people. It took a lot of work to learn lucid dreaming. So I wanted to find an accessible way of people to meet and embrace their shadows in the waking state. And I found that a lot of the books on the subject were really theoretical, really wordy, really academic. but there weren't a lot of kind of practical tips of how can I actually do this in the waking state. So that's why I wrote this book, Dreaming Through Darkness, which has got like, I think over 30 exercises, like mainly practical, everyday things you can do to face and embrace the shadow. So that's my long-winded answer to your first question. And I'm aware I have a massive bowl of, I couldn't find a cup this morning, so I've got a massive bowl of tea, sorry.
No problem.
Embrace the shadow of my embarrassing bowl.
But that's absolutely fascinating. And I'd be curious to ask, after you had that first experience where you hugged the shadow aspect of your personality, what were the short-term effects of that? Did you feel any different the next days, the next weeks? But then going forward as well, how has your life changed since you've started doing this shadow work? Like, has life been any different for you since you started?
So that particular lucid dream, yes, there was a shift the next day. Like, some people say that every lucid dream they have the next day is kind of lit up and bright. I don't always have that because I've had so many lucid dreams, I guess. But that particular one, yeah, there was a sense of kind of lightness the next day, literally like when you've unburdened something. And it lasted up until about lunchtime, like enough for me to remark, to go like, God, why am I feeling like this? God, it must have been that dream. Why am I feeling this? It must have been that dream. I have no indication of what that shadow represented. I didn't ask it what it represented. I didn't dialogue with it. I had no kind of proof that, oh, now I'm not scared of spiders anymore. Or now I've got a better relationship with my dad because it represented my broken relationship with my father. I didn't have any kind of evidential proof like that, but just a sense of lightness, and enough to make me go further into the work. But sometimes, yeah, you'll do a shadow integration exercise and there will be very obvious results. You will notice a change. I mean, stuff I've done recently around, actually the relationship with my dad is a perfect one. There's an exercise in the book, which is based on an exercise that I read in another book called Manhood, which is by Steve Biddulph. Brilliant book to read. Well, I was going to say, if you're a man, if you're a human being, it's a brilliant book to read. It's a very easily accessible book looking at what it means to be a man in a very non-toxic and non-pathologizing way. And in that book, there's an exercise, I think he calls it Day with Your Dad, where if your dad is alive and if he's not, you can do a kind of a letter writing exercise, but you basically spend an extended period of time with your father alone, asking him a series of questions. And these questions open up a dialogue around integration of shadow, though he doesn't use that term, integration of shadow with your father. And that exercise, I spoke more to my father in those 7 hours we spent together that afternoon. I mean this quite literally. I spoke more words to my father, more dialogue to my father than in the 30 years before that.
Wow.
I think if you would have added up the words we said. When you do a shadow exercise like that, yeah, life is different. Like your relationship with a core member of your family, in this case, my father, was shifted and never went back actually. And that's what I mean by practical shadow work stuff, not kind of heady psychological stuff that you need a therapist to tell you, but stuff you can really feel in your body, you can see in your everyday life. I dealt with my shit with my father. We had those discussions. And they're questions like, were you scared when I was born? What kind of child were you? I didn't know it. Was my dad like the cool kid? Was he the bully? Was he the geek? Was he the goth? Like, who was he? Now, some people listening will know those questions because they had an open relationship with their father. But for anyone listening who didn't, to explore those questions and to ask things like, were you scared when I was born? And to see the reaction from your father. And while you ask these questions, you can, if possible, in an ideal situation, you would be asking these questions as your father guides you around the place where he grew up. So that could mean going to a different country. In this case, for me, it just meant going to a different part of London. But we found the street where my father grew up on. We found his school, which is now a college, but we managed to kind of jump over a fence and go and sneak around. I mean, stuff that I've never done with my father. We went to the place where he had his first kiss and stuff like that. These places of significance. Those kind of things are really powerful. And that's the kind of shadow work I'm into, stuff that's real life.
That's incredible. I'd be curious to ask, Charlie, how did you set that up with your father? How did you, I'm just asking from the perspective of someone who might not have as an open relationship with their father, how they might go about setting that kind of thing up.
Yeah, so I've got kind of like 3 levels in the book that you can do. Number one, I mean, I never thought that my dad would go for number 1, but the way in for me was it's research for a book. You know, so his rational, materialistic mind go, oh, okay, well, you know, that's all right then. But the main thing is to let your father know that you come bearing no grudges. This is not about unearthing old stuff and beating him with it. It's about learning about who he was. Because until we know the shadows of our parents, we will call them our own. We will inherit the shadows of our parents. And if our parents haven't done shadow work, which most of our parents haven't, then we will inherit them and we'll call them our own. So it's really important to kind of know that. And I think also for me, it's really important for someone who was looking to be a father a few years ago. It was really important for me. One of my kind of impetuses for doing shadow work was that I was like, I need to integrate this stuff before I pass it on, because the science of epigenetics is very strong now. We know that trauma, fears, and prejudices can literally be passed down epigenetically. So doing the shadow work on ourselves before we become fathers, before we become mothers, I think also is very important. But yeah, so in answer to your question, there are kind of 3 levels. Number 1 is the ideal, which is that your father, firstly, would be alive so you could do this, would be open to doing it, would be willing to go back to the place of his birth with you, and to take a whole half a day or full day out to do this. Number 2 is like a variant of that, getting as much as you can. And then number 3 is my father's dead. So there's a letter writing exercise you can do where you imagine his responses, which is actually quite fascinating to do too.
Very, very interesting. So now, Charlie, I want to move on to your definition of the shadow, because I found from reading your book that was your perspective on it's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. So the definition from Carl Jung, who is obviously the Swiss psychiatrist who pioneered, not invented, but pioneered the idea of the shadow in the West, at least. He defined it as anything within the unconscious mind that we have denied, rejected, or disowned. He then went on to say it is the dark side of the human psyche. But crucially, not dark meaning evil or malign, dark meaning yet to be illuminated. And that's such an important aspect of the definition. So it's not just your bad side. It's not evil. It's not inherent evil. It's not the bad seed theory. It is anything within the unconscious mind that we have rejected, denied, or disowned, which maybe when we think, okay, what do I reject, deny, disown? I reject my prejudice, my unconscious bias, racism, things I'm ashamed of, what am I afraid of, my phobias. I reject my trauma from childhood. You know, all of this stuff I don't want to show others or face myself forms the shadow. But we also think, well, what else do we hide from others? We might hide our inherent beauty. We might hide our sexuality. We might hide our esoteric side. I'm sure there are people watching this interview who, if I ask them, do you ever hide your esoteric side from your friends or family for fear of being labeled too woo-woo? If the answer is yes, that's shadow. You deny, disown, reject. And yet, that's a part of the shadow that's inherently beneficial. Your spiritual side, what could be more beneficial than this? Or our sexuality, or our beauty, or perhaps as a child you were told no one likes a clever clogs. So you suppress your intelligence, you suppress your smart. So that would form the golden shadow. So we have this idea of the shadow as anything that we reject, deny, disown, but it's really important to know that that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's the part of ourselves that we are currently unwilling to accept as part of ourselves, both the dark and the golden. So that would be kind of Jung's Jungian definition. Robert Holden, quite a famous British psychologist, he defines as anything within ourselves that we are currently unwilling to love. And that's great. Anything within ourselves that we are currently unwilling to love. Am I able to love my loneliness? Am I able to love my trauma? And am I able to love my prejudice? God, fuck no. How could I ever love my prejudice? Love does not mean endorse. Love does not mean like. You know, think of family members who you may not like, but do you stop loving them? Love and like should not be confused. We don't have to like the shadow. We don't have to think, oh, that's a good thing I have that prejudice. Or that's a good thing that I have this loneliness. But can we love it? Love being defined in Buddhist terms as unconditional acceptance. So it's about, can we unconditionally accept the content of our mind, both, you know, for better or worse, which is a huge ask. And I absolutely cannot with loads of my stuff, which is why I absolutely don't have a fully integrated shadow. But it's a heck of a lot more integrated than it was before I started this work 10 years ago. And week by week, well, maybe not week by week, month by month, I like to think it becomes slightly more integrated as I do slightly more work on facing my shit and seeing that a lot of our shit is fertilizer. You know, how do you grow roses? You put shit on the ground. You know, no mud, no lotus is a central focus of my approach to the shadow. That the lotus cannot be grown in polished crystal. The lotus flower cannot be grown in pure water. That's true. Lotuses love swamps. They love mud. They love the shit. They need that fertile ground to blossom into the light. So that's kind of my central approach to the shadow.
It's no, it's such a fresh perspective on growth as a person to look at these darker sides of ourselves. And it really clicked for me when I was reading your book. And you said it was something like, it's not that it's bad or harmful. It's simply unintegrated energy. It's something that hasn't been brought into light yet, you know. And I think it clicked for me whenever you said it that way. But I also remember you saying something that you took a 3-year Buddhist retreat in 2015, or no, 3 months. 3 months. Sorry, yeah, that's right. And it was a big learning experience for you. So I'd be curious to ask you, what did you learn during that 3-month retreat?
Okay. I learned that being alone for 23 hours a day, 23 hours a day for 90 days straight isn't actually as bad as you think it is. Now, I emailed a friend of mine who was in prison at the time afterwards. He said, that's worse than jail. He's like, we're only in our cells for 22 hours a day. You had 23. So first of all, it's not as bad as it seems. Although I was alone, I was seeing people most days out of the window because there were other people in the retreat center. God, it's really weird. Look at me. This is shadow, right? I'm trying to justify my experience to you. I want you to know it wasn't as bad as it was. Why am I doing this? Okay, that's interesting to look at the shadow coming up here. I also want you to know that I wasn't silent on every day, that I had about 5 talking days in the 9 days. Sorry, I'm just processing this, and it's probably interesting people to see how this process occurs, because that 3-month retreat was about 4 or 5 years ago now. So I haven't been asked this question for a while. So look at how when that question emerges, I instantly seek to justify my experience here. And actually by doing that, I've forgotten the original question you asked, which is what did I learn, right? Okay, so let's get to actually what did I learn? Let's get beneath that shadow layer. What did I learn? I learned that I was addicted to adoration, that I was unstable in my sense of self, and had used a career trying to teach people how to wake up in their dreams to mask the fact of how unawakened I was. I learned that when you are isolated for long periods of time, your demons will become your friends, because if they don't, they will eat you. They will consume you. So you have to face your demons. And I think I also learned to meditate. Like, I think the 10 years before that, I hadn't really been meditating. I'd been kind of sitting on a cushion saying Buddhist words. But after that 3-month retreat, yeah, I think by the end of it, I was like, oh, I think I can meditate now. So that's what I learned. But mainly the addicted to adoration thing. I realized it was a really kind of, there was an absolutely out of control ego yearning that was addicted to adoration of people. And that I needed constant reassurance that I existed through the form of adoration. And on some days when I was kind of getting over that addiction, because I wasn't seeing people for so many weeks on end, I would go out of my little hut and just look at people who were in the retreat center and just kind of try and have interaction, because I needed proof that I existed. Complete exposure of my ego. I mean, I went into that retreat thinking I'd done some work. I'd been living in the Buddhist center. I'd written a couple of books by then. I realized I was a child. I was kindergarten level spirituality, and I still am. I mean, any illusions that I had of having made any spiritual progress were just shattered in that 3-month retreat, as I was forced to face my shadow. And at one point that manifested very, very powerfully. And if you would have walked into the retreat hut at that time, you would have seen a man probably having what you would describe as a mental breakdown. I mean, I was like, I don't think I've ever shared this actually, but it's so long ago I can now. It feels so long ago. I mean, if you would have walked in at that point, you would have seen me fully naked, fighting imaginary figures, like screaming, which would have looked like a breakdown, right? But I can honestly say now, without shadow, without needing to explain this away, I really feel that was a breakthrough. And I say that because I was witnessing what was occurring. There was a sense of witness that was going, oh, I'm having a bit of I'm going nuts now. And then that witnesser was going, you're not going nuts. You're watching your body going nuts. Release this. Let it happen. Let it happen. Let it happen. So I was kind of watching this thing. And I don't know why I had to be naked and why I had to be fighting, but it was like this release, almost like, bilateral stimulation. I was boom, releasing. It only lasted maybe 40 minutes max. And then that night was the only night in my life where I can tell you for sure I did not dream. Now, I spend most weekends teaching people lucid dreaming, them saying, at least one, I don't dream. And I said, well, you do dream. You can't stop the brain going into REM sleep. It's so important for memory reconsolidation, blah, blah, blah. That night, I did not dream. And I know that because I stayed conscious almost all of the night, and it was just blackness. Now, my theory on that is, if the point of dreaming is reconsolidation of memory and integration of trauma, I feel that moment of breakthrough was so integrative that there was literally nothing to dream about that night. Now, that's just a theory, but 5 years later, I still believe that was it, because I've never since and never before that had a night with no dreams. Good question, man. God, I haven't spoken about that retreat for a long time because it seems so long ago. Yeah, good question. Thank you.
That's fascinating, Charlie. I don't know where to take the interview after that, but I think a good place to go would be, I want to ask, why is it important that we start doing this work, start integrating our shadow both individually and collectively? Like, this seems like it is a very, very important thing for us to be doing, and I'd be curious to ask your opinion on why that is.
Well, when you said that, the first thing that came to me was safety, as it just popped into my head. I think that's, I think integrating our shadow makes us safe.
Okay.
It makes us kind of safe to be loved and safe to offer love. I think a person with an unintegrated shadow, I mean, as I still absolutely do, but a person who hasn't done any attempt to integrate their shadow, is quite a dangerous person, because shadow work asks us to know ourselves. It says, what am I hiding from myself and others? And you see it, warts and all. And with that, you get to know yourself more. And there's a sense of kind of self-compassion and self-empathy. And with that, I think we then begin to project out that sense of empathy and compassion onto others. So I think integrating our shadow makes us kind of more of a safe person. We're less dangerous. You can feel when somebody is dangerous to love. You feel like, God, if I open my heart to this person, will it be broken? If I open my heart to this person, will I be rejected? Can I be vulnerable in front of this person? And there are some people you meet and you think, yeah, I can really be vulnerable in front of this person. I can give them my heart and I know they won't drop it. And I think that's often, when you meet someone like that, it's often someone who's done that work. Whether they call it shadow integration or not is of no consequence. But somebody who's been through the mill, somebody who has known heartbreak, who has grieved, who has perhaps even touched mental illness and come out on the other side, can have deeply integrated shadows because they've gone into that darkness. They've as Campbell says, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. People who've been to those caves come back treasure holders. So I think it's very important for us, for our own mental health, and to make us kind of safe human beings, to love and to offer love. And from a societal point of view, wow, I mean, to change the world, we need to change ourselves, right? If we could get a critical mass of people integrating their shadow, sorting out their relationship with masculinity and femininity, working with their own inner nightmares and, kind of daytime nightmares and nighttime nightmares, what a profound shift that would have on society. Imagine if our world leaders were doing shadow integration exercises. Wow. Yeah, I mean, we'd be in a different world today. So I think, I just invite people to try it. Try some of the exercises in the book or in other books and just see how it makes you feel. And it will make you feel uncomfortable and then it will make you feel safe. because you feel, I've been into that part of myself. It's there and it's okay. And also, apart from anything else, you realize, God, if I'm dealing with this shit, then so is everybody else. And that's okay. We realize everybody's trying their best. We're all wounded. We're all fucked up. All of us. You know, everybody has these minor traumas, whether we know it or not. We're walking around as traumatized individuals. We're children. And I think if we can see people with the kind of that empathy of the fact that we're all wounded children trying our best, yeah, life becomes much more cohesive and peaceful, I think.
No, that makes a lot of sense for sure. And I just wonder about things like, you know, what happened in Nazi Germany and things like those were people just like us. And they were capable of doing like incredibly evil things, and that we're capable of that as well. And I think bringing awareness to that can only be good, you know?
Yeah. I mean, when people think, well, what do I do if I don't integrate my shadow? If we don't integrate our shadow, it festers, it grows, and has a more and more powerful magnetic pull on the psyche. And if the shadow gains enough power through enough repression, and it's through repression and suppression that we give power to the shadow, it can eventually split off. And when it splits off, that's what's happening in situations that we might call kind of evil or of great harm. This is not, you know, I don't believe in any inherent evil within the human psyche, but I believe if we leave the shadow unintegrated for long enough, and if the shadow becomes split off enough, then we have this kind of inner psychosis, this psychotic split that occurs within us. And that can be very, very damaging. And I think Jung has actually spoken, I mean, you mentioned Nazi Germany, of course, he was, you know, operating around that time. He's written a lot on the concept of the shadow in relation to Nazi Germany and the kind of collective hold that the shadow had over people. And of course, the projection of that shadow onto the Jewish population, the non-German population. Yeah, there's some interesting work from Jung on that. But actually, that's the one part in the book I don't go there at all. I have something, I think, in like at least the first chapter where I say I'm not touching on the global collective shadow simply because I don't know enough about it. I don't have the age or wisdom to go there, but many other people do, like Jung.
Interesting. Now, what are some ways that people can become aware of their own shadow? Like, are there any things that people can do or just notice that would sort of, you know, bring light to the shadow sides of their personality?
Yeah, let me give an example. Oh, I know what. I'll give an example of an exercise which we can then put the link maybe in this interview, because the full exercise is, you can get it for free on my YouTube channel. That I cut it from a online shadow integration course I've got. So we can put this link in. It's called the two-face mask exercise. And you get a kind of white mask, you know, one you'd kind of draw on as a child. You can buy it from Amazon or a toy shop or something like that. Any color mask, but white is quite good, and you'll see why. Plain white mask. So you've got the outside of the mask, inside the mask. And what I ask people to do is on the outside of the mask to write, draw, or symbolize their persona. Their persona being, well, persona means mask actually in Greek, but it's your self-presentation to the world, how you present yourself to the world. So I might write on the outside of the mask, you know, lucid dreaming teacher, Buddhist, shadow integration author, man, British, you know, how do I present myself to the world? And a lot of those are true and immutable, but some of them are actually, they're not, they're perceptions. They are opinions I have about myself. You know, I might write kind, enthusiastic. Yeah, I am enthusiastic sometimes, and I am kind sometimes. Am I enthusiastic all the time? No. If you would have woken me up at 6 o'clock this morning, like the barking puppy did, I would not be enthusiastic and I would not be kind. So our persona is how we present ourselves to the world, but it's not always true. In fact, you know what? I've got a mask back here. One sec. Okay, this is the original mask that I used for this exercise. So this is about, this is when I came back from the retreat. So this is coming up to 4 or 5 years old now. So on the outside, so this is outdated, but on the outside, I wrote things like smiley, lovable, trustworthy, brave, friendly, yogi, joyous, knowledgeable, attractive, empath, integrated, well-balanced, lucid dreamer, all this stuff. Okay, some of that is true, but a lot of it is not. And most importantly, is it true 100% of the time? No. then it's your persona. It's how I want the world to see me. Well, this is how I wanted the world to see me 4 years ago. Then on the inside of the mask, we write everything we hide from others. So I've got judgmental, scared boy, porn watcher, body image issues, shame, need to be validated, part-time lucid dreamer, anger, arrogance, fighter, bully, sex addict, violent fantasies, all this stuff that I hope nobody would ever find out about me. And this, talking about what I learned in the 3-month retreat, this exercise came to me in the retreat just after that breakthrough day. I was like, whoa, I've just been wearing a mask for my whole life. So when I came back from retreat, I bought this mask from Amazon. This is the original one. And I did this exercise. And as I was doing it and I was writing the kind of the shadow content, that which I hide, I started to feel really good. And I thought, whoa, I thought this would really bum me out looking at all this stuff. But I started to feel really good. So I'm sitting on my bed in the Buddhist center. And I get the mask and I put it down like this, shadow side up. And then I suddenly thought, what if my fiance at the time, now my wife, Jade, walks in and sees the mask? So I went, and I turned it down. And then I thought, what a hypocrite. You claim to be writing this book about the shadow, all this kind of stuff, and you can't even show your wife. So I turned it back up. And then I had this little kind of voice inside my head. I still don't know whether it's the devil on the shoulder or the angel on the shoulder, but it went, you should put it on Facebook. Be really authentic, share this with the world. And in a moment of kind of madness, I got my phone and I took a photo of the inside and the outside. And I shared it on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. It's like over 10,000 followers. And there was about maybe not even 30 seconds, probably 10 seconds where I felt good. I was like, oh yeah, I've done this. This is really authentic. And then just this anxiety in my gut started. And I was like, oh shit, what have I done? I've just admitted to looking at porn and having violent fantasies and 3 main things came to me. Number 1, I'm going to get asked to leave the Buddhist center because the Lama is going to ask, well, where are you watching porn, mate? Whose internet connection are you using to look at? I thought, oh my God, I get shut out of the Buddhist center. Next thing, I'm going to lose my publishing contract with Hay House because Hay House are really kind of, love and light, spiritual. Oh my God, they're going to hate me. And then number 3, Jade, my fiance at the time, isn't going to marry me. If she knows what kind of man I really am, how could she love this? Quite a profound moment, actually. So anyway, I rushed to try and take it down off Facebook. But I put it up with this thing called Hootsuite, which you'll remember there's an old app that used to put on all things. So I'm trying to work out to get it out of all the platforms. And then suddenly my phone just starts vibrating and pinging. Ping, 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 ping. Oh no, it's everyone telling me they hate me and I've lost my job. But it was likes. And then it was comments. And it was more comments. And then within a couple of hours, it was my most liked, most positively commented on, most shared social media post of all time. And I thought, wow, something's happening. Within a couple of hours, actually, one guy had gone to a toy shop, bought his own mask, done the exercise and uploaded it to the thread. And that was when I thought, okay, this is going in the book. And it is in the book. And then, a few hours later, Jay did come into the room. And by this time I was like, oh, look at my mask. Look what I've done. And she had a look at it and went, and what about the rest? And I was like, what do you mean the rest? And she went, well, I know all that stuff. I was like, how do you know all that stuff? She's like, you're my fiance. Of course I know all that stuff. So all this stuff I was so scared to show her, she knew anyway. And she'd already learned to love anyway. So that's such a good example of shadow work. And in the book and the course and in the video that we'll share below, you're invited to do this exercise. There's a little bit more. There's kind of guided meditation before and stuff. And then afterwards, you are advised to share your mask with another. To kind of, if we were doing it together, you would give me my mask, I would give yours. And just in silence, we would read each other's masks. And that's really strong experience to hear someone kind of witnessing your shadow. And 9 times out of 10, something in your mask will also be in my mask because we're sharing the same stuff. We got the same shit. We got the same traumas. And it's a really brilliant exercise to breed empathy. And then the final step, if people want to, is I invite them to upload their mask, just like I did, to my Facebook page. And now, I think 3 years since the book came out, there's hundreds. I think we're coming up to 200, 300 masks uploaded onto the Facebook page now from all around the world in different languages. People who've read the book, who've done the course, they go on the page and upload it. And it's great to flick through and you see, oh, that guy in Andalusia has the same shadow as me. Oh, that guy in Thailand also has big issues with his father, the way his father treated him as a child. You think, we're in this together. And that's, I think that's a good example of the shadow work exercise that I offer and my approach to it and also the kind of benefits we can get from it. Now, just one thing to say, a caveat, it's not that we want to do this more. It's not that I say, oh yeah, I'm a porn watcher, so now I'll just go and watch porn all the time. Actually, what happened was once I could admit to that, once I could speak that out loud, my compulsion of watching porn 4 years ago greatly, greatly decreased. Because what I realized was, although the shadow was watching porn, the actual creation of the shadow was loneliness. If we think of it like this, imagine literally what a shadow is. We have a source of light. Use my phone. We have a source of light. We have something blocking a source of light, and we have a shadow that is cast. So we got the source of light, the block, and the shadow. Now the shadow was watching porn. So I was concerned with that, thinking, how do I stop watching porn? Why do I keep watching porn? You know, how do I stop watching porn? What I needed to do was look at the reasons why I was looking at porn. What was blocking my light that was manifesting as a compulsion at looking at porn? And it was loneliness. That's why I was looking at porn. So once I could turn towards the light and start working on my fear of loneliness, the compulsion to look at porn greatly reduced. And now, years down the line, I don't look at porn anymore. But it took, you know, after that, it kind of just greatly reduced. Because I was looking at porn because I was lonely. Because porn could give me a sexual experience with no fear of rejection. My fear of rejection was so great that sometimes I would choose to have a sexual experience with a laptop rather than with a human being, because I knew the laptop wouldn't reject me. But every time with a human being, there was fear of rejection. So deep was my shadow of addiction to adoration that it was affecting my sex life in that way. So when I could start to look at that, look at loneliness, look at fear of addiction to adoration, that was the block that I needed to integrate. And without that block, there's no shadow cast. Yeah, so that's how the shadow work works for me.
That exercise is brilliant, Charlie. I've never heard that before, but there's so
cool,
much,
isn't it? Try it.
It's amazing. There's so much power in that, and I think it shows us our shared humanity, like all these things that we hide from everybody else.
Yes.
We have them in common, and it just, when someone like yourself has the courage to just admit that openly, it just, I don't know, I think it has a profound effect on the people that experience that, you know. I write a blog myself, just like a personal one, and any time in the past where I've been like shit scared to share something on there, and I've done it anyway, like I've had like a bad psychedelic experience, for example, and I wrote about it, and just before I posted that, I was like, this is going to ruin my life if I do this, but I felt it was important to do, so I did it anyway, and it was really popular, you know. It was
exactly.
You know, so there's something, I can't explain it, but there is something really powerful about sharing these things we want to hide from others, and we're
vulnerability, man. Vulnerability is such an attractive trait, you know, and I mean attractive in all ways, as in it's romantically attractive, it's humanly attractive. It's like when someone really opens their heart in a vulnerable way, there's such power to it, you know. As I can only speak from the point of view of man, but I'm sure all humans, but as a man, there's often a fear of being vulnerable because it might be confused as weakness. But actually, if we're truly vulnerable, the power it takes to be truly vulnerable in front of another human being is an act of power. It's incredibly powerful if we do it, you know, really open-heartedly. And people can feel that power. And it's an attractive quality, and goes, wow, if Niall can do that, then maybe I can open up too. Maybe I can express myself. And it can lead to this kind of domino effect of empathetic compassion. And that's how shadow work changes the world. You know, that's how it can affect the world. People like you writing those blogs, being vulnerable enough to share the side of yourself that you would rather hide, definition of the shadow, the side of yourself you would rather hide from others. You shared your shadow, you were vulnerable, and it led to a great response.
And I think when we do this, we're not operating anymore on the level of the persona. We're operating from a deeper part of ourselves.
Absolutely, the mask is taken off. Yeah,
big time. So Charlie, I think that's pretty much all we've got time for. Before you go, are there any quick sort of practical things you would recommend people to do this work, or resources to check out to follow on from this interview?
Yeah, I'd say let's make sure we put that, the 12-minute video, the dropping the mask of shame exercise, in this link. If you like that exercise is taken from a 6-week shadow integration online course I've got, so you could check out that. And as far as kind of tips for tonight, I'd say look at your dreams. You know, you want to see your shadow straight away, look to your dreams. You know, look, because we spend the whole day trying to suppress our shadow. You know, sexy thought, violent thought. Oh, it's like whack-a-mole, right? We're like boom, 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 constantly whacking down the shadow. But at night, that kind of the egocentric preference system, as my teacher would say, which creates the whack-a-mole effect, that goes to sleep. So all those moles, boom, can pop up. Sexuality, unintegrated stuff, fear, prejudice, they pop up. So look to your dreams and really have a look at the content of your dreams. What's making you feel uncomfortable in your dreams? What prejudices are revealing themselves in your dreams? You know, if you want to know who you are, look at your dreams. They'll show you. Who are you secretly in love with? Look at your dreams. You know, what trauma is still unintegrated from childhood? Look at your dreams. Which kid wounded us as a child? That kid who keeps popping, you know, often it could be that kid who keeps popping up in our dream. It's like the dreams are showing us, they're pointing the way. They're saying, here lies unintegrated material. So I think that's something people can do tonight. Yeah.
Fascinating. As well, Charlie's done an introductory lecture on lucid dreaming for the Weekend University. That's on YouTube too. You'll probably find that online.
Oh yeah.
And aside from your online course, where can people find the online course, Charlie, on shadow integration?
Just if you just go to my website, charliemorley.com, or if you type in Charlie Morley shadow integration or something. I mean, I'd love to say, you know, I've got all these workshops coming up in the future. I mean, I do. How many will be cancelled? I don't know. I mean, everything's cancelled through August. Maybe after August, everything will be back to normal. I'll be doing live workshops. If not, I'm doing loads of Zoom stuff. But if people just keep a look on my website, then I'll keep updated.